You're listening to the Decisive Podcast, insights and analysis to empower confident decision-making. Welcome to the Decisive Podcast, brought to you by S&P Global Market Intelligence. I'm your host, Kristen Hallam. In this episode, we're discussing congestion at the world's ports. Joining me for this discussion is Max Janthur, the product specialist for port performance. Welcome to the podcast, Max. It's great to have you on.
Hi, Kristen. Thank you. It's great to be here.
So, Max, what prompted you and the team to put this report together?
So we think that port congestion remains a real risk for global trade and economies, and therefore we think it's something we should always monitor. And the unique nature of the data puts us in a position to provide an accurate assessment of what's going on at a time of great uncertainty.
All right. So before we get into the key findings, Max, let's talk about some of the terminology in the report, which may be unfamiliar to some of our listeners. What do we mean by arrival process time?
So with arrival process time, we will look at the total elapsed time of when a vessel arrives at a port, either in a waiting zone or one of the port limits. And then we stop counting when the vessel has arrived at berth and all lines are fast.
Okay. And what is port efficiency and why is that important?
With port efficiency, we refer to how quickly a port can handle cargo. This is important for a few reasons. One reason is cost reduction. Efficient ports reduce operational costs for shipping lines by minimizing turnaround times and optimizing cargo handling processes. This leads to lower shipping rates, benefiting industries reliant on shipping. Secondly, supply chain optimization. Ports serve as critical nodes in global supply chains. Efficient operations ensure timely delivery of goods, enhancing the reliability of supply chains and reducing inventory costs for industries. This also increases customer satisfaction in industries that are reliant on timely deliveries. Thirdly, economic growth. Ports contribute significantly to national and regional economies by facilitating trade. Efficient port operations can attract more shipping traffic, leading to increased economic activity, job creation, and, for example, tax revenue. And lastly, I also would like to highlight that efficient port operations can lead to reduced emissions and environmental impact. Efficient logistics reduce congestion and delays, contributing to greener supply chain practices. And then in the analysis, we look at a few metrics to quantify the port efficiency. So we look at the vessel turnaround time, so the arrival process and port hours, which either waiting zone or port limits until it leaves the berth. Then we also look at port moves per hour and berth moves per hour. Port moves per hour is call size or total moves divided by port hours, and berth moves per hour is call size or total moves divided by berth hours. This metric shows how many moves port was able to execute within an hour. So the more moves it was able to perform within an hour, the more efficient it is, but the lower amount of moves, the less efficient. And then we also look at dwell time. Yard productivity is linked to port's performance. The flow of new arrivals can be interrupted if port is experiencing long dwell times.
So a lot of different measurements into it. That's really interesting. And that was also quite a list of reasons why this information is important. Max, how many ports are included in the report?
So in this report, we included about 70 ports. So how we eventually decided those 70 ports was we looked at the data on a regional level, including all our ports. And once we saw there was a big increase in arrival process time year on year, we started to look further into it and find out which ports were the main contributors to that big increase of arrival process. And after that process, we were able to make sample groups for each region, including the ports that had the biggest year-on-year increase in arrival process time.
So Max, what are the risks and impacts of port congestion and what are the key findings of the report?
So I'd like to highlight 3 risks and impacts of port congestion. So one is, as mentioned before, increased costs. So congestion often results in longer turnaround time for vessels, leading to increased operational costs for shipping lines. And these costs can include higher fuel consumption due to idling, additional port fees, and increased labor costs for handling cargo. And ultimately, these costs may be passed on to consumers, leading to higher prices for goods. And secondly, we also have port congestion can cause supply chain disruptions. So it can cause delays in the delivery of goods, disrupting the entire supply chain. Industries that rely on timely shipments may force production halts, inventory shortages, and missed deadlines, which can damage relationships with customers and affect overall business performance. This can also lead to a ripple effect, impacting suppliers and distributors throughout the supply chain. And then thirdly, an impact that it can have is as well on the environment. So increased congestion often leads to higher emissions from vessels and vehicles waiting to load or unload cargo. This can contribute to air pollution and negatively impact local communities. Additionally, prolonged congestion can lead to inefficient use of resources and increase the environmental footprint of port operations. In our analysis, we found that there are multiple port congestion events happening in Q1 2025. Our main finding was that arrival process time increased year on year in many ports, and after collecting all the data, we were able to split the sample group into two sections. So the first section was that we saw ports that had a very big increase in arrival process time, but they did not have a lower berth productivity. And then in the other group, we saw there were ports that had a year-on-year increase in arrival process and also a decrease in berth productivity. So in North America, arrival process increased notably. It was the second largest year-on-year increase we saw in the report, but berth productivity stayed relatively the same. So even though more vessels had to wait in terms of how quickly a port was able to handle the cargo once the vessel was at berth, didn't get affected that much. And then in Southeast Asia, we seen as well that arrival process increased, but berth productivity decreased. So that means that the cargo operations were also slower than usual compared to the same period last year.
So that's very interesting. Who else, other than myself and yourself, would be interested in these findings, Max?
First and foremost, I think governments would find this report interesting because, as mentioned before, port congestion has an impact on the country's economy. Port congestion affects trade flows, which causes delay in delivery of goods. And this can in turn have a ripple effect on the economy and cause, for example, inflation. Having more visibility on what's going on at the ports can help them determine if there's a need to act. And they can also then see, okay, where exactly are the issues, and that can help them to more efficiently force policies if needed. Then we also have carriers. Operational efficiency is very important. Understanding congestion patterns allows carriers to optimize their shipping routes and schedules, reducing delays and improving turnaround times. And then as well, besides operational efficiency, customer satisfaction is also important. So timely delivery is crucial to achieve that, and carriers can enhance their service reliability and maintain customer loyalty by mitigating congestion issues. And thirdly, I think port operators would also be interested in this. Port operators can use data and the report as a benchmarking tool. They can compare their performance with the performance of other ports, and they can see, okay, what are some areas they could potentially improve in. And then lastly, supply chain strategy executives could be interested in this. So for them, having the access to the port data could help them with the strategic decision-making process. So insights into port congestion can inform high-level strategic decisions regarding sourcing, production locations, distribution networks, and ensuring alignment with market conditions. Understanding congestion trends can help develop good long-term strategies.
So it's time for us to wrap up our conversation. Any final thoughts for our listeners, Max?
Yeah, I'd like to emphasize again that port congestion remains a very real risk for global trade and many global economies. And we must therefore keep a close eye on trends so we can prevent or limit the consequences of major disruptions. And while life is full of uncertainties, one undeniable truth remains: global supply chain disruptions are an inevitable recurring challenge.
All right. Thank you so much, Max, for taking the time to share your insights with us. That concludes this episode of the Decisive Podcast. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to the Decisive Podcast from S&P Global. Please subscribe and join us for next week's episode. Until then, stay curious and stay informed.